Hello, everyone, and welcome back to People Jew Wanna Know podcast. I have a fascinating episode for you today featuring Amichai Lau Lavie. Amichai is a rabbi, social activist, storyteller, writer, and community leader. He is the co-founding spiritual leader of the Shul community in New York City and the creator of the ritual theater company Storytelling, Inc. Israeli-born, he's been living in New York since 1998. Amichai received his rabbinical ordination from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in 2016 and is the 39th generation of rabbis in his family and the first one to be openly queer. Rabbi Amichai is the star of Sabbath Queen, Sandy Dubowski's award-winning documentary film which follows Amichai's journey. This film took 21 years to make and premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in June 2024. Amichai also serves on the Executive Board of Rabbis for Human Rights, is a co-founding member of the Jewish Emergent Network, a founding faculty member of the Reboot Network, and serves on the advisory board of the Sulha Peace Project for Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers. He also has leadership positions on the Leadership Council of New York Jewish Agenda, the Advisory Council for the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and serves as an advisor to Jerusalem Open House for Pride and Tolerance. He's been named an iconoclastic mystic by Time Out New York, a calm voice for peace by NPR, a rock star by the New York Times, a maverick spiritual leader by the Times of Israel, and one of the most interesting thinkers in the Jewish world by the Jewish Week. In 2017, he was also named one of America's top 50 rabbis by The Forward. In 2022, Rabbi Amichai began publishing Below the Bible Belt, which is a daily digital project extended over 42 months where he rereads all 929 chapters of the Hebrew Bible. When this episode is released, he should be finishing that project in a little under half a year. Amichai is also Abba to Alice, Ezra, and Kai Hallel. This bio, in and of itself, gives you a glimpse at the tremendous scope of work and projects Amichai has taken on. There's something vibrant, multifaceted, busy, complicated, and lovable all at the same time about Amichai. I learned about him through my friend Daniel Zoller, who told me about the film Sabbath Queen. And this has got to be like the fifth time I name drop Daniel in the podcast because he always suggests the best people. Daniel had invited me to see Sabbath Queen at Soho House, no less, but unfortunately I wasn't available, so I ended up connecting with the Sabbath Queen team, watching the film, and getting Amichai in the podcast, and what you're about to hear is a very interesting conversation. However, let me first tell you about the Sabbath Queen film. As I mentioned, it took over 21 years to make, and it follows Amichai's journey. And it's a complicated journey. Amichai comes from 38 consecutive generations of rabbis. And they're not just like any rabbis. They are highly acclaimed, influential ones. For example, Amichai's uncle, David Lau, was the chief rabbi of Israel up until 2024. So, of course, there's pressure for Amichai to live up to his lineage, but the plot twist of the film is that Amichai decides to embrace his queer identity, and we watch how he wrestles with what seems to be an incompatibility between being a rabbi from an Orthodox family and living a queer life. Now, make no mistake, Amichai does not turn away from his Judaism. He embraces it. He channels his Judaism through theater, music, art. He creates a drag queen persona, Hadassah, who allows him to channel his Judaism. This film, Sabbath Queen, is Amichai's evolution and the blend of tradition with radical change. We see how Amichai builds his congregation, Shul, which is a very progressive, God-optional, quote-unquote, come-as-you-are congregation. It's a place where anything can be questioned and challenged. We see him host services dressed as a drag queen and these eclectic song sessions where the space is packed to the brim with people. The film also gives us a glimpse of Amichai's activism. He advocates for the ending of the occupation in the West Bank in Israel, among many other peace efforts. This movie is challenging because it doesn't tell you how to feel about Amichai. It leaves you thinking, at what point did Amichai push it too far? How do we know when we've strayed away from tradition and when Judaism isn't Judaism anymore? And that's the point. He leaves you in what he will describe in this episode as the messy middle. And look, I don't agree with some of the philosophies that Amichai holds. I don't think that some things can be rewritten in Judaism. For example, Judaism and God optional are mutually exclusive things to me personally. You can certainly be culturally Jewish and be an atheist, but to practice Judaism, the religion, and be an atheist feels mutually exclusive to me. I think that Judaism, the religion, requires faith in a creator and a greater being. Now, some congregants in Amichai's Shul think otherwise, but this to me is exactly what's interesting. I love that there are Jewish people that challenge the status quo, and I want to learn from them. I also don't support some of Amichai's stances on Israel, which you'll hear about in the episode, but what I love about our conversation is that we clearly agree on the bottom line. We agree that there should be peace and coexistence and that Israel has made mistakes that will require repair. We also both deeply care about Israel, and I loved learning about Amichai's tremendous work being there on the ground right now. Having conversations with people like Amichai reminds me why I started this podcast. We all know about the social media echo chamber issue, but let me tell you, People Jew Want to Know is definitely not an echo chamber, and I'm so proud of that. There is wisdom I gained from this episode from talking to Amichai that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I deeply respect him and his unwavering commitment to Judaism, his incredible family lineage of rabbis, and his passion for helping others. I highly recommend you watch his film. It will certainly leave an impression. And the movie, honestly, even after 21 years of filming, it still kind of leaves on a cliffhanger that makes us wonder, what will Amichai do next? I really hope that the next time Amichai is in New York, I will have a chance to meet him, be it at a service or just for coffee. And I know that his congregation will probably scare me a little bit because I grew up in a conservative Jewish space and his shul is a lot more flexible. But that's what makes me want to go. Where I think Amichai really gets it right in this episode is specifically when he says Judaism needs to figure out pluralism. To me, that's spot on. And I'm trying to figure out pluralism by exposing myself and you, my listener, to his points of view and to a more creative thinking. Please enjoy this episode. Hello, Amichai. Welcome to People Jew Want to Know podcast. How are you this evening?
Hello. It is wonderful to get to know you.
Thanks so much for doing this. My first question for you is, tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
I would say I'm first and foremost a storyteller. And I've been doing storytelling since my early 20s in Israel. And I realized that stories are the way to save the soul of society and to reclaim some of the oldest values we've forgotten. So I started doing theater. I was a high school teacher. I became a drag queen, eventually a rabbi. Now I'm a minor movie star because of the Sabbath Queen. And I'm going around the world teaching and storytelling and trying to get people to care a little more about the things that matter most.
Let's talk about your film, Sabbath Queen. It's a film that took you 21 years to make. It's a very long time to make a movie. What is the message that you hope to send with it, and what has already been the response?
Well, first of all, it took Sandy Dubowski, my beloved friend and the director of the film, 21 years to make the film. I was just minding my own business and doing what I was doing, and he kept filming. What the film is ultimately about, I think, is the invitation to meet in the messy middle, not to be in the polarization of pro this or anti that, not to be all about gay or all about straight, all about orthodox or all about secular. I'm about blurring the binaries. That is my own journey. That is my own solution to many of our tensions. And what the film, I think, is inviting people to do is to think literally outside the box and meet in the messy middle. The film was first filmed, we started shooting right after 9/11, and we ended filming after October 7th. On some level, it depicts the first 2 decades of the 21st century with amazing points of progress and innovation and hopes, and also a lot of low points, and where we are now witnessing authoritarian takeover and such terrible, devastating war. And so my message continues as a queer activist, as a progressive rabbi, as an Israeli American, as a peacemaker. The only way forward is to find the way to meet in the messy middle.
I was curious if, looking back on those years when you were filmed, if there's anything you feel so differently about than you did at the time that it was filming. Like when if I were to think about myself, 10 years ago even, I think I held such different viewpoints or beliefs than I do today. What do you think looking back on the film? Is there anything that you see from the past that you're like, I don't think that at all anymore?
I'm definitely questioning my fashion choices and facial hair, that over 20 years, you're like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised that I've been relatively consistent with my choices. And I also think the way, I'm a storyteller, Sandy is a storyteller. The story that he chose to tell was the one that has consistency, that shows the human evolution from chapter to chapter. And even though it seems jarring and even odd, some of the choices I've made, it feels consistent. And I am very grateful to him for spotlighting the ways in which my moral choices, my aesthetic choices, my political choices, my spiritual choices build on each other.
There's a scene in the movie that I really loved because it felt very freeing to me. It was a scene when you're dressed in full drag and you walk into the water in your clothes and everything, and it's like almost like a mikvah experience. How did you get into drag? And tell me the impact it has had on you. How do you view those two different characters?
The scene you're describing is when Hadassah Gross, my alter ego, the Rebbitzin, who showed up on Purim, the holiday in which was supposed to be upside down in the late 1990s, in the 20th century, demanding to be heard as a spiritual teacher, as a persona of over-the-top spirituality in ways that I wasn't comfortable being out as a religious or a spiritual person in the gay world, in my secular world, but she was. And she gave me permission over a decade of performing to be the public spiritual religious person I am, and eventually to become a rabbi. She's the widow of 6 rabbis, but then I became one myself. And that scene is when she decided to go into the Dead Sea, in the lowest place on earth, and redeem the feminine divine, the Shekhinah, from the clutches of patriarchy. So she goes into the Dead Sea. The last thing you see is her wig floating. And she said, don't wait up. It's going to take a very long time to defeat patriarchy. I'm on it. She's been down there for 10 years. I think she's beginning to emerge. We need her now more than ever. She gave me permission through the mask, through the humor, through the wig, through the heels, to be most myself. That's what masks do. And through humor and through irreverence, to touch the place of the holiest and the most reverence. And that was what she did for others. People would come to a nightclub or a show, wherever she was. And on the one hand, it's a drag show and we're laughing our asses off. But on the other hand, it's religious ritual and it's Jewish mystic knowledge. That in between, that neither nor both and is what this messy middle was all about. And through the laughter, we were able to cry. There was great healing that she offered and offers. And she gave me the permission to be who I am. I eventually realized that I can do it without the makeup.
This kind of brings me to something I've been thinking about how to ask you, because you talk about it as a messy middle, which is exactly how I would describe it too. But there's something controversial about your film that I love. It pushes the boundaries a little bit. You come from a lineage of rabbis, numerous rabbis, and you are one yourself. You're continuing that lineage. And at the same time, you have rewritten some of the traditions and customs that we typically find in Judaism. In fact, you also would, I think, argue that it's important that we rewrite them in order for Judaism to survive. Where do you think the boundaries are in Judaism? At what point is it no longer fair to say that something is Judaism? And how do you decide that for yourself?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, there's a case-per-case scenario here. We, on the one hand, are tethered to the past, because it's a relay race and we are sitting on the shoulders of giants. On the other hand, Judaism was always about the split screen between the Torah we inherited, PDF, canonized, as is, behind glass doors. We revere the sacred, but also the oral teaching, the Torah of now, updating the version. It's a Google Doc. We keep updating what we've got, and we got to figure out what's the baby and what's the bathwater. So, for instance, feminism, right? 100 plus years ago, changed the playing field all over the world for humans, not just in the West, but in Judaism. Can women count in the quorum of 10? Can a woman be a rabbi? Until recently, for thousands of years, women, like you, were second-class citizens. You weren't allowed to be a leader or to count among the prayers. That's no longer morally or socially viable in the world where I live. I'm an openly gay man. Until not so long ago, my choice to love who I am and who I love, because that's how I was born, was considered an abomination, and I was supposed to just shut up and do what I'm told and not let my own expression express itself. That's no longer viable in the world of free will and choice and expression and individuality. So Judaism can and must evolve. If we talk back to Torah and to some of the laws that are misogynistic or homophobic, that are racist or xenophobic, it doesn't mean we're defying Judaism. It means we're redefining the essence. And so baby and bathwater is a really good analogy here. Hold on to the baby, but bathwater can and must change. And that is the only difference right now between ultra-Orthodox Jews and extra-liberal Jews, is how much do we change? But there's no question that we keep evolving. That is the beauty and why I love the Jewish tradition. We keep refining ourselves from one generation to the other.
Amichai, are you still mostly based out of New York or somewhere else? And I'll explain why I ask in a second.
I'm on the line very much so between Israel and the U.S. I'm originally from Israel. I've been living in New York since 1998. Since October 7th, I've been coming much more regularly to Israel to be with my Israeli family and friends at this time of great turmoil, to be with my Palestinian peacemaker friends and be involved as much as possible in dialogue, bridge building, and healing. So right now I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, and I'm back and forth.
Makes sense. I ask because I feel like the conservative movement, or anything in between, in the messy middle, in New York is dying. We're seeing very strong modern Orthodox shuls, communities, especially servicing young people, young families, and very strong pluralistic, reform, reconstructionist synagogues also in Manhattan. And I, as someone who grew up conservative, I feel like neither really fit my belief system. And it's an interesting divergence. The messy middle is disappearing to me.
Well, I think it's reinventing itself. The messy middle can be the very boring beige. We don't want boring beige. We don't want to dilute our uniqueness. We want to find a place where we are colorfully, messily together. I think of no tougher and better place to talk about than the political moment right now, where in my world and in my community, Lab Shul, the congregation that I helped found some years ago, which is a God-optional, everybody-friendly, artist-driven pop-up community in New York City, is comprised of people who are Zionist and people who are anti-Zionist, people who love Israel and people who now loathe Israel, people who know a lot about it and people who know nothing about it. We invite our community to come together, to listen to each other, not to put our feelings or our thoughts aside, but to be in a place in the messy middle where we honor the complexity and we find a path forward. It's not easy, but we refuse to be in binaries. Binaries is what got us into this trouble in the first place. And I know that you asked about the conservative movement, about religious affiliation. I'm going straight to the politics. That isn't what's on my mind right now. I am here and I'm very much involved in much of the work here to both define Israeli and Jewish democracy, to find paths forward for peace, and to see the dignity of both sides. Religiously, I think the conservative movement is one that is relatively new. It's a century plus old. It is reimagining itself. While there are some congregations that are sort of sticking to the old script, there are those who are reimagining what it's like to be juicy and creative and inviting, whether that is reform, conservative, non-denominational. The denominations, frankly, are not that important to me. Right? I grew up on TV. There was ABC, CBS, NBC. Who the hell cares? There's Hulu, there's Netflix, there's TikTok, right? So I don't think we should be as tethered to the old denominations and definitions. We have to be attuned to the fluidity of what it is that people want. I'm in my 50s. I'm looking at people in their 20s. I have children in their teens. The Judaism that they're creating is different than the one I created. And that's the joy, to watch it grow, but watch it grow with literacy, watch it grow with intelligence, watch it grow with a responsibility, both to our past and to our future. That takes some patience. And most of us like to download it really quickly and swipe left and right. It's going to take a little more than that to be a responsible caretaker and steward of a thousands-of-year-old tradition that is reinventing itself in this very complicated and privileged age.
I think you would have good advice on this for someone like me. So in the movie, when you go to Jewish Theological Seminary, you struggle with this concept of God optional with your congregation lab shul, because as a rabbi, it's not God optional. It's very much God mandatory kind of for you. Like, this is what you're studying. And I remember in the film, you're wrestling how you're going to blend these new beliefs and points of view that you have about Judaism with the congregation that you built. It almost felt to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you were becoming more observant as you were going through the JTS experience and becoming a rabbi. Is that right? No?
Yes and no. I've held on for quite a few years to the toolbox that helps me be a better person. Many of those tools come from the Jewish traditions. They require discipline. It's what I do in the morning when I get up and I focus on gratitude and do my morning ritual, guided by Jewish tradition and meditation. It's what I do when I reimagine Shabbat. It's not exactly the Shabbat that I grew up with in my very Orthodox household. It's a little more fluid and flexible and creative, but there's still the notion of how do I sanctify a day of rest, etc., etc. So what I've been struggling with and wrestling with and creatively playing with is what of the mitzvot, the commandments, the recipes, the tools, the tales that we have, what still applies? What needs a tweak? Right? Again, whether it's the feminist or whether it's the queer, whether it's the fact that 70+% of American Jews who are not Orthodox choose to partner with people who are not Jewish and are not becoming Jewish. So how do we translate what we have to be user-friendly and everybody-friendly in a way that doesn't dilute the essence, but makes it meaningful to other people, whether they have another faith that they grew up with, or as most in the United States right now are like not really religious, sort of vaguely spiritual, but seeking a spiritual language. We want to have meaning making as part of how we live. And let I say, especially right now, this last year and a half, this war is rupturing and getting so many of us to find a place where I belong to my tribe, and I'm wrestling with my tribe, but I need solidarity, I need community. Whatever's happening in American politics is pitting us apart over religious, ideological, political divides, and yet what we really want is to sit around the table and have the ability to talk to each other, to hear each other. My favorite Jewish startup is the Shabbat table. Every week, you put down your phone, you get dressed really nicely, you have a nice meal with a tablecloth and candles, and you sing together, and you take the time to be a human being, not a human doing, and you grow as a human being. That I'm not giving up. I'm refining it, reimagining it, redesigning it. Maybe it's grandma's chicken soup recipe, and maybe it's Chinese takeaway. But the technology we inherited is valuable. We need to know what of it to keep and what of it to tweak.
I love that. And here's where I was leading with this. When I think about things like, 70% of people are choosing to partner with someone that's not Jewish, or a congregation where some people are Zionists and anti-Zionist, I'll tell you honestly, like from the onset, that thought, just even thinking about it makes me uncomfortable, because to me, there's something sacred about Judaism where it's a land-based religion that believes in a Jewish state, the nation of Israel, the nation of Jewish people. And so I struggle understanding how anti-Zionists could want to connect to a faith where they reject a primary tenet of it. How do you reconcile? Because some of these things to me feel like contradictions. You cannot be Jewish but believe that the Jewish people are not entitled to their own nation state. Like we pray to Jerusalem, you know what I mean? How do you help bridge gaps between people who believe such different things in one congregation?
For the majority of Jewish history, nation state was not a reality. It was maybe a vision, maybe a dream. Yes, we might be turning to Jerusalem, and we talk about next year in Jerusalem on the Passover Seder, but that's hyperbole. It's precious for some, not for others. For the majority of Jewish history, even when Jews could live in the land of Israel, they chose not to. The diasporist thinking is not a foreign aspect of Jewish life. State of Israel is less than 80 years old. Zionism is a century plus old. It's a wonderful concept, as long as we live up to our moral values and live on the land with a type of ethics, a type of responsibility to our own people, to the other people there, and create peace instead of creating conflict. So I, for one, believe that there could be a progressive Zionist, a liberal Zionist, a nuanced, new kind of Zionist that believes in our right to be here. My father was a Holocaust survivor who came to this land before there was a country and helped build it. My mother immigrated from England in the 1950s as a Zionist. I grew up here. I served in the army. I believe in this place's right to exist. And if we don't get our act together about true democracy and about true ethical values that honor the dignity of all human beings on this land, from the river to the sea, we will lose our right to be here. The fundamentalist right-wing extremist government that right now is in charge of Israel and is responsible for so much heartache and bloodshed within Israel and for Palestinians is one that some Israelis voted for, but many did not and are disillusioned about. And the people outside Israel, whether they're Zionist, anti-Zionist, first of all, I think there's a huge lack of education about what those words mean. And secondly, I think you absolutely could be a Jew for whom Judaism matters, for whom Jewish value matters, and for whom the state of Israel doesn't matter. And I know that because for hundreds and hundreds of years, my ancestors lived very rich Jewish lives with no connection to the land of Israel. There was no state of Israel. It was a vague idea. In fact, most of our history is there. So we're in a different place right now. And we're in the middle of the story. The story is evolving. Wherever we're going to be a year from now, 10 years from now, I am hopeful that we're going to come out of this narrow place of sorrow into a phenomenal vision of repair and healing. And it's going to always and have to be from a place of respecting the diversity of opinions. Torah has 70 faces, our tradition says. We're going to have to figure out pluralism. Because if we don't figure out pluralism, then we are in a mono-singularism that is shutting down the conversation. A culture of conflict is the core strategy of Jewish survival, and we have to be better at respecting other values, other voices, and after other opinions, even when they rub us the wrong way. It's not easy. If there's anything I've learned, and if anything the Sabbath Queen film is about, is that we are invited again and again and again to love a little harder, to try and love the parts of myself I don't love as much more, to love other people in my orbit, in my community, in the world a little more, because that is the core Jewish value. Ve'ahavta, and you will love, is the central teaching of Torah. That's what we must do. It sounds very hunky-dory, but it's actually hard work. Love is hard work.
I think you bring up a really interesting point, and there were generations of people who lived without a state of Israel, and they still practiced Judaism, and they weren't so concerned with the state of Israel because they could just live their Jewish lives wherever they were living in the diaspora. But I imagine they don't deny the right of Israel to exist. And I think that's what's so challenging for Jewry today is it's okay if Israel doesn't matter to you, but don't deny me the right to a nation state where my people can be safe. This shouldn't exclude self-determination for Palestinian people, God forbid. Like, that is not what we should strive for. And that's why I completely agree with you that if we don't turn ourselves around here and figure out what to do and how to exist peacefully, we may lose the right to a nation state, right? Exactly what you're saying. But this is where I think the paradigm has changed, where we have this percentage, let's say, 5% of anti-Zionist Jews for whom a concept of a state that's unique to the Jewish people is a non-starter question. And that's what I don't understand. To me, that's like saying the earth is flat. You know, this is just invalid, full stop. There's no negotiation, no room to move, no bridge to build.
Agreed. I think very rigid ideologies, whether that is AIPAC or JVP, right? Whether it is MAGA or whether it is, whatever version of progressive woke that doesn't understand that the world is more nuanced and more complicated than my way or your way is getting us into trouble. And we are seeing in 2025 the terrible, terrible price that we're paying for very rigid ideologies that negate the other side. So when it comes to the Zionist conversation, I can understand why people I know, love, and respect want nothing to do with Israel and think that currently, because of what's going on in Gaza and because of the occupation, Israel has no right to exist. It has lost its moral compass and it's lost its North Star. Now, I disagree with that. I think our work is repair. We got to get in there and we got to fix fix. I think the occupation is corrupt. I think what's going on with extremist fundamentalism, that's the Judaism that's not in my name. And it's my task as a rabbi, as a father, as a queer activist, as a human being, to do all that I can to redeem the sparks of the moral Judaism that I believe in from what it has become. Same work in the United States, same work everywhere in the world where authoritarian voices are shutting down liberalism and LGBTQ rights are being rescinded and women's lives and dignity is on the line and democracy is being demoralized. We got to fight back. We don't fight back by saying you're not legit. We're saying we have a debate here. And I'm not coming from something that I want. I'm coming from something that I know, right? I come from thousands of years of a Jewish tradition that believes in human dignity, that believes in justice, and that believes in equality and hope. And we have that. And if we lose that, then what are we living for, right? The bottom line, more profit. Thank you, Mr. Musk. That is not what life is about. Life is about much more than the bottom line.
Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Politics is something that you've followed, at least Israeli politics, for a very long time. Even as we watch your life unfold through the film Sabbath Queen, you are going to different rallies, protests, you are fighting for people's rights and the occupation, you're against the settlements. And now you are staying in Israel, supporting people who are going through time of war, the worst event since the Holocaust, effectively. You are taking part in history. How would you like to see this thing unwind? Do you have an opinion on this?
The thing meaning what? What's
the current conflict, the fact that we have hostages that are still held, the fact that 6 or 5 million people have been displaced out of their homes and they're coming back to a parking lot, which is Gaza. Do you have an opinion on what would be the optimal pathway out?
There's room on this land for these two nations. In the book of Genesis, Abraham, the father of all these mythic people, is told, L'zaracha eten et haaretz hazot. I will give this land to your seed. It is very specific. It doesn't say Isaac. It doesn't say Ishmael. It doesn't say the other 6 boys. It says to your children. We are those children. The Abrahamic family has a responsibility, a privilege, and the opportunity to get over this family feud, to make sure that promised land is what we're both given and that there is room here for reimagining this tragedy. That will be a light unto the nations. That is our mission. And I truly believe that there are enough people on both sides of this divide. And I'm saying so because I know so, because I work day and night with Israelis and with Palestinians, with Jews, Muslims, and Christians who are fed up with this fury and with this bloodshed and this either-or paradigm that is not real and is not realistic and is killing us. It might not be tomorrow. There isn't a leadership right now, both in Israel and in the Palestinian Authority, for sure not Hamas, to take us towards a place of concession, reconciliation, truth, rehabilitation, and repair. We're not there yet. We're in the middle of the crisis. We will get there. It might be in my lifetime, it might not. But to not imagine that we can get over this either or, mine or yours, your land, my land, when there is enough room for both. When I'm watching religious Jews ransack and pogrom Palestinian villages because land is more holy than life, what the hell is that? When I'm watching the horror that Hamas has created in not only abusing the Israeli people, but their own people? No, in the name of what? In the name of religion? In the name of territorial future? That's no future. That is only death. We believe in life. We believe in love, which is not a lofty concept. It's the deepest and hardest exercise there is. And I believe there is a future here. And all the people that I know, we're not the majority, but we're not the minority either, are getting beyond the historical hurt, beyond our intergenerational trauma, beyond the victimization, and have visions and the political imagination and the moral imagination to see strategic solutions that honor the freedom, the safety, the dignity of both people. What I'm saying right now sounds very big, and many of my Israeli friends are like, please shut up. And when I talk about it, just today, I had a conversation with a queer filmmaker in Tel Aviv. We're sitting around talking about blah, 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 blah. And he's like, I used to be a lefty, but ever since October 7th, I don't believe there's anybody on the other side who cares. And I tell him, look, here's names, here's faces, here are faith leaders, here are political leaders, here are activists. There were thousands of Palestinians in Gaza in the last few weeks who protested against Hamas. Some of them were executed by Hamas at a high risk. There are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting in the streets for the last few years against the judicial reform of Netanyahu and now against the war's huge price tag on our well-being. There are enough people there who want to see a better way. Some of them are in the United States, helping to not lose sight of the future. So I am hopeful. I'm an optimist. I think spirals work in a way that contracts and expands. Right now, we're in a contraction. But the expansion, the widening spaciousness of the spiral of well-being, I believe we'll get there.
You know, what you're saying lines up with what a lot of the centrist philosophers and scholars on this conflict have said that I've interviewed. I think where the distinction is between what you say and what they might feel is that they feel that there's not a peace partner on the Palestinian side that's weighty enough to actually bring the peace process forward. Like, congratulations, there are people that are protesting Hamas. There are political leaders that are speaking out against Hamas. But that number needs to be not hundreds, not thousands, but millions, right? It needs to be the majority, in some sense, of the Palestinians living between Gaza and West Bank that feel that way in order for there to be a handshake that occurs between Palestinians and Israelis. And the longer we wait, the more radicalized we see some of Israeli society become. Like when you talk about those Orthodox communities that are fighting to set up illegal settlements in the West Bank and they're causing conflict, we're starting to see frays in the fabric of Israeli society that are starting to hurt the peace process from the other side. The longer I study this, the more I wish that the timing was more fortuitous, that there was a stronger peace partner on the Palestinian side, because if there was even a glimmer of hope, I think even with the extremism that we see from the Israeli society, we'd still have enough on the Israeli side at any given time to agree to a deal. And that's also consistent with history, right? Israel has always agreed to any version of a land deal.
The miracle is that after all these years of occupation, and firsthand speaking of what's happening in the South Hebron Hills, what's happening in the West Bank, people that I'm talking to in Gaza, that despite these dehumanization factors of what it's like to go from, crosswatch to having all the conditions of life being under occupation, that there are still prominent voices who are saying Israelis are not monsters, Jews are not monsters, peace is possible. To expect that there is a reasonable leadership right now in the Palestinian Authority after all these years of attrition is not realistic, right? When people are in very, very tough conditions, the Maslow'ian ladder, it's about survival. And yet there are people there and their voices are silenced. Let's not forget the Israeli government under Netanyahu for 2 decades now has done its damn best to quell and suppress reasonable and honest attempts for reconciliation and for a peace deal, because that is not the ideology of Netanyahu. That is not the ideology of the Likud. The iron wall, the villa in the jungle, is the ideology that this comes from. We're going to be a strong colonial force in the middle of this Mediterranean hotbed of primitives, and that's the only way we're going to survive. That is colonial. That is a mentality that has proven fatal and toxic and no longer doable, right? The people, and I grew up in a family where many of my cousins are settlers. My family belongs to the leaders of the settler movement. I grew up with that ideology. I believed in that ideology until I was 17 years old. And then I heard Amos Oz, the great Israeli author and peacemaker, say, I have a dream, the dream I inherited from my father. And the dream I inherited from my father is, this is our land, the Jewish land, from the river to the sea, the Holy Land, promised to our ancestors, and I want that dream. Thing is, my neighbor Abdallah has the same dream that he got from his father and his father, that it's the land from the river to the sea. Both of us are dreaming the same dream, and both of us are dreaming a nightmare. If we don't wake up and understand that we can share this land, there will be no dream, there will be just a nightmare. We have to wake up from unrealistic dreams. And that is what I, at 17, kind of realized. And I became a peace activist. And I believe it's going to take some time, but more people will wake up that it's either bloodshed or peaceful building. There's room here for all. There is so much richness to be benefited from the cultures of both people. And right now we're suffering from lack of empathy, from deep trauma. October 7th is a wound that is going to fester for a very long time. I'm not belittling it. There are still hostages out there. There are numerous casualties. We're seeing every day more deaths and more pain. We're not way out of this yet. So when I'm talking about a peaceful solution and the courage to look your enemy in the eye and extend your hand and say, for the sake of the future, let's imagine a better path, that's not an easy thing to do. It's going to require a deep process of reckoning with our past, not just the last 70 or 80 years, but thousands of years of toxic theology that both Jews and Muslims have toted. It's part of our sacred scriptures. We got to talk back to our traditions and say that's no longer going to be how we play. We have to pray and we have to imagine a different way. That is where my ideology as a rabbi and as a thinker and as an artist is we have to talk back to our tradition. We can't just verbatim copy-paste from one generation to the other. What served our ancestors, including misogyny, including homophobia, including the fear of the other, had its purpose. And I honor that. But we're in a different place right now. And just like I want my gay rights to be recognized as a Jew with a seat at the table, with no compromising of my dignity and my being in divine image, so it is for my Muslim neighbor, and so it is for my Palestinian friend. We have to figure it out. That's my job as a Jew. On the Palestinian side, they have their job to do. They have to get over generations of toxicity, and they have to get over their trauma of the occupation and the way they've handled us. Thankfully, there are people, and I'm in the middle of planning a Passover Seder right now that is going to be with Israelis and Palestinians and Americans who are Muslims and Americans who are Christian. And we're figuring out how to do a Passover Seder that is charting the collective liberation path. And I believe that's the only way forward.
Amichai, do you think the Moshiach is coming?
I think the Messiah is not a he or she. We are the Messiah. I am the Messiah, and so are you. It's about messianic consciousness. And I like to say, you got to put the mess back in Messiah because it's messy. And in Hebrew, the word Mashiach is actually, if you flip it, the word is Masiach, Siach. Siach is dialogue. When we're truly in dialogue with each other, when we're really committed to hearing each other's truth, even though it's not ours, and have enough space in my heart to hear yours and you to hear mine, and honor our path, that's messianic. That's the dialogue, and that's the respectful, courageous conversation that we've been waiting for. And I hope we get there.
I like that. Tell me, what are you optimistic about? I know it can feel hard to even say that word optimistic, but is there anything that gives you a lot of hope?
I'm seeing so many activists refuse to give up on trust and on hope in a future, whether it's climate activists, whether it's people who are fighting against all the I don't know how to call it, the decrees of the current American regime on human rights, on dignity, on our basic democratic rights. People are out there fighting. I'm seeing people in Israel night after night out there to hold the hand of the hostage families, to demand the release, to demand an end to this war, to find a better path that isn't one of tanks and bloodshed. People on the streets every single night. Some of them once a week, some of them not, but that gives me hope. I'm seeing the human spirit at its best. I'm seeing it in Istanbul, fighting the authoritarian regime there. I'm seeing it in Budapest, fighting the anti-LGBTQ laws that have just passed. I'm seeing it when it comes to Kiev, and I'm seeing it where it comes in El Salvador, right? It's hard to be an activist in a world that really endangers your life. But whether online and in person, the human spirit that refuses to give up is what gives us inspiration. So I'm optimistic that we will not be silenced. And again, I come from a tradition of poets and activists and mystics and believers in Tikkun Olam. It's our job to be co-creators of a better world. We can give up, but then what's the point?
What do you think Hadassah would say about this time?
Well, Hadassah secretly came out for a very quick Purim pop-up a couple of weeks ago just to test the waters. She was in New York for 24 hours for emergency meetings at the UN, and she popped up at our Purim show, and she taught us that the only way to go high is to first go low. You've got to go down to then rise up. And she taught the whole community the song, which is, our ancestors are alive, everybody high, 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 high. Keep rising. So we got to go low to go high. We have to go down to the surface and deeper, deeper into our souls and the dark night of the soul so we can help bring the dawn.
She astutely points that out at the bottom of the Dead Sea.
Exactly. You got to go to the lowest place on earth in order to rise up as high as possible and be the North Star to the aspirations we cannot let go of.
Tell me, and how can people connect with you on social media and learn more about your upcoming work?
Fantastic. So first of all, Amichai Lau Lavie on Instagram is a popular place to hang out. You can also check out Below the Bible Belt. It is my daily blog where I'm reading the entire Hebrew Bible, chapter by chapter. It takes 3.5 years. We're 3 years down, but there's another 6 months and many chapters left. That's also on Instagram. Check out Lab Shul, our community in New York, LABSHUL. And, of course, Sabbath Queen, the film. It's touring all over the world. We're going to be in Washington, D.C., and in Berlin, back in Israel, in New York, all over the world. I'm excited for more people to see it and have conversations about it and be part of the movement.
If you're going to do services in New York, can you tell me so I can come? I want to experience one of your services.
Please. Lab Shul meets once a month for Shabbat, Sabbath Queen. It's going to happen this Friday, April 4th. I won't be there. My team is leading. The next one I'm leading is May 2nd. It's also Israeli Independence Week. And we're going to devote our Friday night, Sabbath Queen, to prayers for peace. We're going to pray, whether you believe in God or not, whatever your politics are. We want to sing our heart out for the visions of positive peace in the world.
Amazing. And I have one final question for you. It's one that I ask every guest of the podcast. Who would you like to nominate for People Jew Want to Know? You're going to say Hadassah. Just kidding.
Hadassah doesn't do interviews anymore. She's super busy. But, oh gosh, such a good question. There are so many amazing people. My friend Jericho Vincent, who is a really amazing rabbi in New York City, if you haven't met Jericho yet, is amazing. My friend Mushon here in Israel, who is an amazing political strategist and one of the founders of Land for All. I just hung out with Mushon yesterday. You know what? I got 3 great kids. My 16-year-old son Ezra has a big mouth and a big brain, super smart. His 2 siblings as well. So bring my kids on. I'm going to leave it at that. There are so many wonderful people doing amazing work. And I'm delighted that you're doing this and exposing the riches of our people and our complicated narratives to a world that needs positive role models and complex stories and nuanced narratives, and celebrate our tradition in the ways that we can reclaim it. It's a pleasure to meet you. I loved your questions and your attitude. And thank you for wrestling with what's tough and not shying away from the tough questions. That's really what we're about.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People Jew Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People Jew Want to Know.